Welcome, beloved souls, to a sacred journey where heaven's light touches our hearts and uplifts our spirits. This is really embarrassing for the chosen one. They lost even though the entire freaking town banded together to oppose you. Take a moment to consider that. One was selected, a whole community, with all of its assets, contacts, and well-coordinated plans, all of its hatred directed against one individual. In addition to failing to destroy you, they also ruined themselves. If it weren't so pitiful, it would be funny. Imagine being so intimidated by one person that you had to enlist the assistance of your neighbors, family, local government, and even total strangers to defeat them, to battle someone whose only weapons were truth and a pure heart. Picture yourself so weak that you required an army. They failed to anticipate that they would be declaring war on the cosmos itself, not just on you. And the cosmos doesn't lose wars, as they are about to learn. It simply chooses the most humiliating method for its adversaries to defeat themselves. What began as rumors turned into a concerted act of devastation. Even though they were obvious targets, blood being thicker than water, even when it's tainted with deceit, your ex hadn't simply enlisted their family. No, this network was extensive, complex, and firmly ingrained in your neighborhood. Each layer of the revelation was more startling than the one before it. Neighbors who had borrowed sugar and engaged in small talk, friends you had trusted for years, and authority figures who had sworn oaths to protect and serve you. Even family members, who ought to have supported you without reservation, had been carefully manipulated to turn against you. They referred to it as concern. It was dubbed intervention. They referred to it as love wrapped in tough choices. But in reality, they were taking part in something that would have pleased the masterminds of past persecution, a whole community coming together to oppose a single person, all because your former partner saw you as a danger that required elimination. You should have been frightened, broken, and driven to the closest city, so that you might vanish into anonymity by the enormity of it. But keep in mind that you have been chosen, and those who are chosen do not flee from conflicts they are destined to win, even if they are unaware that victory is imminent. The most important thing, chosen one, is that they failed to count on your pure heart, which they were unable to touch no matter how hard they tried. In ways that went beyond reason, you sensed that everything was wrong. Even when everything around you seemed to be telling you that up was down and south was north, your inner compass stayed true. They chuckled as you raised your voice and started pointing out the contradictions and the improbable coincidences. How they laughed, though. Your former partner and their cronies found it amusing that you were attempting self-defense. They had you totally cornered, outgunned, and outnumbered. How could you, tiny old you, have harmed their powerful alliance? They were going to learn. Yellow heart if you feel the divine love. Now is the time to share. Click the super thank you button on YouTube to contribute $50 or more and help us spread God's blessings. What you do is being watched and serves as a seed, and in the future it will come back to you a millionfold. Not all of your tormentors were satisfied with psychological warfare alone. They needed to think beyond the box. In order to utilize spiritual attacks against someone whose spirit was protected by something far larger than their combined malice, they had to experiment with forces they didn't fully comprehend. They directed everything of their anger, envy, and frantic desire to see you ruined towards you night after night. They had such faith that it would succeed. They did, after all, have the numbers, the coordination, and the one goal. In the face of such concentrated darkness, what could one pure heart do? The whole affair, as it happened, not only did the attacks fail, but they also made a remarkable comeback. Because of the purity they were attempting to destroy, the evil energy they sent your way was amplified and bounced back to your inherent spiritual defenses. They experienced astonishing consequences, including insomnia, paranoia, and the increasing insanity that results from seeing your own evil threefold reflected back at you. Skeptics became believers, and believers became scared kids hiding beneath blankets as they began to see, hear, and experience phenomena. The hardest hit was your ex, the shrewd manipulator who had planned this whole operation. They developed a pitiful and dangerous obsession with you, unable to let go of the past, since it was now pursuing them. They were also aware that confronting you would require them to face the seriousness of their actions. Your ex resorted to more drastic tactics when their conventional attacks failed more spectacularly each time. They resorted to candle rituals and mirror magic, sending you reflections of their own twisted energy in an attempt to ensnare you in self-destructive and doubtful cycles. They performed rites intended to shatter your will and bond your spirit, and they lit candles with your name engraved into the wax. The fact that mirrors reflect truth is something they have never grasped when interacting with them. A pure-hearted person sees only love staring back at them when they gaze into a mirror. The only thing that happens when someone with a warped heart uses mirror magic on someone who is pure-hearted is that they reveal themselves exactly what they have become. Instead of cursing you, they condemned themselves with every rite they carried out. They mirrored their own darkness back at them tenfold. In every mirror they used to send hate your way. They were practically witnessing the transformation of themselves into the monsters they had always been, and the experience was pushing them towards total mental breakdown. Even more destructive was the candle wizardry. Fire is a purifying element that destroys a practitioner's own spiritual defenses when it is employed maliciously against someone who is shielded by divine energies. They were deliberately undermining their own psychological defenses while bolstering yours. They were more susceptible to the very powers they were attempting to control with each ceremony. The more investigators looked into your ex's activities, the more they discovered a years-long pattern of financial crimes. In addition to stealing from you, the signature forging was a part of a larger scheme to use advanced identity theft techniques to scam several victims. Your ex had been expertly falsifying signatures on financial instruments, insurance claims, and court documents. They had siphoned money from victims who were unaware that they had been targeted, created accounts in other people's names, and stolen identities. Because of the scope of the operation, investigators started to think that they were dealing with a professional criminal who had been trained in financial fraud. However, your signature forgery was distinct. It was intimate. It wasn't just intended to steal from you. It was intended to directly harm you. They had falsified your name on records that would have harmed your reputation, damaged your credit, and left you penniless. The necessary degree of venom testified to a hatred so intense that it almost amounted to neurotic obsession. The irony was that they had been reckless because they felt compelled to ruin you. Their emotional investment in your ruin made them careless, even though they had been meticulous with other victims, hiding their traces with expert precision. With strangers, they would never have left evidence trails. Their entire criminal business came to an end because of their personal grudge. Your ex's most pitiful tactic to date was creating a baby trap scenario as their world began to fall apart and their desperation reached new heights. It came at a strangely convenient moment, as public opinion was swinging decisively against their entire network and the legal walls were closing in around them. This was a deliberate manipulation intended to achieve several objectives at once, not just a lie. In order to postpone the inquiry into their crimes, they sought to incite public sympathy, guilt you into making amends, and cause legal issues. However, the universe has a way of revealing lies that were maliciously told, documentation that didn't match up, contradictions in their story that became more obvious with each recounting, and a total lack of proof to back up their assertions. Sensing they had gone beyond manipulation to open fraud, even their closest associates started to doubt their deceit. Even their most ardent followers turned against them because of the fabricated baby trap claim. Making up a possible parenthood in order to control a victim is particularly unsettling. It exposed an emotional illness that even seasoned criminals found unsettling. When they realized they had been helping someone whose capacity for deceit had no bottom, their inner circle started to fall apart. It was not yet time for the most terrible disclosure. You learned something that would rock you to your core as the layers of conspiracy began to peel away like rotting paint. Your own family, who were meant to love you without conditions, had joined this destructive effort. Maybe not all of them, but enough to challenge your preconceived notions about familial ties and blood allegiance. Some had never really accepted you, since they were adoptive parents. Others saw an opportunity to get rid of the stranger because they were step-relatives. The worst, however, were those who were born into the conspiracy and exchanged your welfare for acceptance. Dove brother and sister, everything done in faith is returned in God's abundance. You can donate $100 using the Super Thank You button and be part of this divine call. If your roots are connected to Him, your fruit will be blessed. For months, perhaps even years, they had been providing your tormentors with information, turning your weaknesses, anxieties, and private moments of uncertainty into weapons, because it was delivered by the same voices that used to sing lullabies and wish you a happy birthday. The betrayal was more painful than any harsh act from a stranger. What they didn't realize, though, is that for chosen ones, souls designated for a unique destiny, blood desertion just makes room for the emergence of spiritual family. Celestial bonds fortify while earthly ones break. Divine protection increases when human protection is removed. It was never intended for you to travel this route by yourself. The Obsidian Inner Order is a haven for the exiles, the awakened, and those who have been abandoned for their truth and gaslight for their gifts. It is more than simply another religious organization. Every week, real individuals with real faces share their transformational tales in a live Zoom gathering. A healer who overcame ritual abuse and discovered their power, a former CFO who accepted their psychic skills, and a seer who liberated themselves from religious oppression. Numerous others join us who are well aware of your experiences. This is your spiritual family. They will never abandon you. They will never leave you to face this revelation alone, and they will never ignore your pain as if it were nothing. For us, the family that chooses you back, your exile from the everyday world served as preparation rather than punishment. The cosmos wasn't done protecting you. Join the Obsidian Inner Order. Link in description. Notice was taken by your ancestors, those who had come before you, who had fought their own wars and earned their spot in the eternal realm. They were not happy when they witnessed what was being done to their descendant. Subtle signs of the haunting included whispering in empty rooms, shadows that moved without apparent cause, and dreams that were more real than the real world. The sort of divine occurrence that shakes believers and causes atheists to pray. Your tormentors ended up stuck in a horror film that they made up. The same individuals who had ridiculed your spirituality and labeled your intuition an illusion suddenly had to face forces they couldn't comprehend. Furthermore, their armies lacked mercy. The person in charge of your persecution, who was driven by feelings of inadequacy and jealousy, and had never been able to control money or emotions, started to fall apart. The pressure of divine justice caused their carefully crafted facade to crumble. They were baffled by the dramatic failure of their tried-and-true tactics of destruction. As the investigation progressed, it became evident that the operation's actual scale went beyond a community's misplaced worry or your ex's bruised pride. This had to do with something far darker, a clandestine organization that was exploring methods for wider use by means of experimental psychological torture. Every level of authority was affected by the corruption. Police officers who had vowed to serve and protect had turned become foot soldiers in a psychological warfare effort. They actively took part in the harassing that was ruining your life, submitted fake reports, and disregarded valid complaints. The insignia that ought to have stood for justice had turned into an oppressive tool. The rabbit hole went even deeper, though, as some network members engaged in practices so heinous that even seasoned investigators found it difficult to comprehend the evidence. Child exploitation rings masquerading as neighborhood associations, human trafficking under the guise of social services, and systematic abuse of the weakest members of society. Your case unintentionally revealed a network of corruption that went much beyond retaliation. You had turned into the fissure in their foundation that caused the whole thing to collapse. Their entire operation was exposed by those who believed they were eliminating a single inconvenient truth-teller. The irony was ideal. They destroyed the very network they had attempted to save out of conceit. Like a light, your pure heart attracted the attention of forces that would not stand for such darkness to go unchecked. The fabricated reports began to conflict with one another. The lies that were told to the authorities, including false complaints and fake evidence, started to create gaps that were large enough to fit a truck. The members of your ex's family who had joined the campaign out of misplaced devotion started to notice flaws in the story that they had been told. Others doubled down, unable to confront the thought that they had been coerced into something hideous, while others raised unpleasant questions. The hidden club that had appeared to be so strong was now being investigated. Targeting someone who is under the protection of divine energies exposes you to cosmic justice in addition to enragement. Furthermore, cosmic justice cannot be purchased, coerced, or perverted way human justice can. The seemingly strong network started to break apart. The unity they had used as a weapon against you crumbled under the weight of their own retaliatory hatred as suspicion began to grow. They began to turn on one another, with each group attempting to sacrifice the others in order to rescue itself. Then everything changed when the punchline of the cosmic joke was revealed. Furthermore, they were the object of worldwide humor, not you. The people who had made fun of you for expressing the truth were now forced to face the truth about their crimes. Unlawful monitoring, coordinated harassment, criminal conspiracy to ruin the life of an innocent person, and the depths of depravity some had descended to. They believed they were incredibly intelligent, cohesive, and strong, but they had made a crucial mistake. They underestimated your true self. They viewed your love as naivete, your generosity as weakness, and your pure heart as a prey. They failed to remember that weaklings are not chosen by the cosmos. It selects those who can endure the flames and come out of them cleansed. Those who can stand in truth amid lies, love in the face of hatred, and uphold their integrity when it seems like everything is against them. The giggling ceased. The derision perished. As they started to understand that they had been attacking a natural force rather than a victim, the casual cruelty turned into dread. Each wave of exposure was more catastrophic than the one before it. First, the blatant criminals, the money crimes, the fake documents, the bogus police reports were apprehended. Even the most dishonest authorities were unable to ignore the paper trails these left behind for good. For the first time in their life, your ex, the skilled manipulator, had to deal with actual repercussions. Criminal conspiracies are like houses of cards. If one component is disturbed, the entire structure collapses. Therefore, the investigation couldn't end there. Investigations were conducted into the complicit authorities. Those in the community who had engaged in harassment were forced to respond to awkward inquiries. The once powerful secret society found that its greatest strength and ultimate weakness was its concealment. When their actions were eventually exposed, they were unable to use group influence as an excuse. Each member was responsible for their own decisions and stood alone. Their own prosecution used all of those thorough records of psychological torture as evidence. Their crimes were now demonstrated by the same meticulousness that gave them a sense of professionalism. It appears that there is humor in the universe. What your tormentors believed to be their triumphal procession ended up being their burial march. Their planned assault turned into their planned suicide. They neglected to safeguard themselves because they were so consumed with harming you. They exposed themselves to the identical energies they attempted to use against you, and they were caught completely off guard when those forces recovered, and the spiritual attacks they unleashed intensified. Someone who couldn't accept that their campaign of destruction had failed was the cause of the baby trap, the frantic attempts to stay relevant, and the more unpredictable behavior. Not only had they failed in their attempt to ruin you, but they had also damaged themselves in the process. If it weren't so awful, the projection would have been poetic because it was so flawless and comprehensive. It was they who were unable to cope with reality. It was they who were living in fantasy. It was they who were unable to take ownership of their acts. They confessed their own misdeeds with each allegation they made against you. At this point, you start to realize why you were picked. Not because you are flawless, but because you are pure. Not because you are strong, but because you are prepared to be vulnerable in a society that penalizes vulnerability. Not because you are wise, but because you are prepared to speak the truth even when it seems like insanity. Not only were you destined to survive their attacks, but you were also destined to expose them, to be the light that exposed the darkness, to be the catalyst that brought justice to those who believed they were above it, and to demonstrate that no conspiracy, no matter how big or well organized, can ever defeat the truth. You were forged, not broken, as they had attempted. Glowing star, if you want to witness God's miracles, act now. Contribute $100 or more through Super Thank You on YouTube. Your offering is like a seed that comes back to you when planted. Let His light illuminate your steps. Every donation is an echo in His plan. You got stronger with each attack. Your truth becomes more obvious with each untruth. You grew closer to the heavenly forces guarding you with each attempt to separate you. You can now see the wider picture as their world falls apart and yours starts to come back together. This isn't just about you. It's about everyone who has ever been the subject of such plots, been gaslighted, harassed, or mistreated by individuals in positions of authority, or been told they were insane for expressing the truth. The fact that they did it all to themselves is the most exquisite aspect of this cosmic comedy. Their own decisions are directly responsible for every consequence they encounter. You only needed to stay loyal to yourself, and the universe took care of the rest. You didn't need to plan their demise or exact retribution. When your ex, the cunning manipulator, realized the truth about what they had done, they were unable to speak. The person who had no financial management skills was in danger of going bankrupt. The person who was continually playing mind games discovered that their own thoughts were working against them. The people in the community who opposed you had to face the truth about their involvement. Some fled into denial because they couldn't accept the seriousness of their errors, while others felt true shame and tried to make apologies. They must all, however, live with the knowledge that they were involved in something genuinely malevolent. The once powerful secret society is revealed and vulnerable. The network that appeared to be stable devolves into chaos and recrimination. The complicit authorities are under investigation. And you, chosen one, come out of this furnace polished like gold, not unharmed. No one goes through what you did and is left unmarked, but more resilient, smarter, and devoted to your mission than before. Being selected means having the ability to turn hardship into insight, anguish into purpose, and persecution into power. Not that one is immune to suffering. You discovered that having a pure heart is a strength that can resist any attack rather than a weakness that may be taken advantage of. You discovered that all it takes to defend the truth is one person who is prepared to express it, no matter the cost. You also discovered that, although it occasionally takes longer than we would want to disclose its plan, the cosmos never deserts its chosen ones. You were unintentionally groomed for your actual calling by those who attempted to destroy you. They put your determination, moral character, and ability to love in the face of hatred to the test, and you passed each one, not because you were flawless, but rather because you didn't compromise your core self. Thus, you find yourself standing in the wreckage of their plot, witnessing the arrival of justice. It's not the justice you may have thought of. It's more thorough, more profound, and more precisely suited to their offenses than anything that human courts could come up with. They believed they were creating your tale, and that they were the ones who destroyed you. But in reality, they were only characters in a much greater story, one in which love triumphed over hatred, good overcame evil, and truth overcame lies. It was ultimately necessary for the entire damn town to band together against you in order to expose their true selves. Because sometimes, in order to fully display the power of a single chosen villain, the universe requires an entire town full of them. Your narrative isn't finished. In fact, it's just getting started, since you now understand your true self, your true potential, and your true purpose. You are a fighter of light, not merely a survival,